Hi there, welcome to my channel and thanks so much for stopping by. I really wanted to make a video that has honestly been weighing on my heart for years, but naturally anytime there are protests and rioting and really sad events in the news, a lot of these issues tend to crop up and come to people's attention in a fresh way. So since the issue is on my heart, I thought, why not? Let me just go ahead and make this video that I've been thinking about for a very long time. And so this video is going to be specifically for anybody that works with Black students. If you're just wondering, how can I help my students of color, my Black students, become successful? How can I be somebody that helps them and is an asset in their life? I really want to give you some ideas from a Black teacher and from someone that has worked predominantly with Black students. I want to give you some of the ideas that I have had over my 7 years in education, and I'll go ahead and let you know now, some of these opinions may not be politically correct. Some way, somehow, they might be offensive to somebody, and that's definitely not my intent. I come in peace. I really just want to be a voice that's bringing some potential solutions to the table, and obviously this is just going to be the beginning of the conversation. I can't solve the world's issues and bring world peace, in a video on YouTube, but I would love to start the conversation and see what you guys think as well. So I'm going to sort of sum up my ideas in two major pillars with two supporting ideas, okay? So I think when working with Black students, empathy is really important, but accountability is also really important. Supporting those things, I believe that honesty is very important, as well as empowerment through education. And of course, I'm going to explain to you what I mean about all of these things. And again, the purpose of this video is how to work with students of color in a way that is going to help them be successful and hopefully just continue to bring solutions to some of the issues that we're experiencing in our world. So let me talk a little bit about empathy and accountability. As a teacher, I have noticed that a lot of times people really emphasize one or the other, and then sometimes when one is emphasized without the other, it actually ends up causing problems, whereas if you have both of these things, it's going to help students in the long run. So what do I mean? So I think now we're trending more toward empathy, which again, it's a good thing. In a lot of my schools, there's a lot of information about trauma smart teaching. There's a lot of information about just understanding some of the difficult things that students of color have been through and are going through. And there's a much deeper understanding of some of the roots that sometimes produce challenging behaviors and circumstances in the lives of students of color. And that is great. I'm all for that. However, I have had some concerns when empathy is emphasized to the exclusion of accountability. What do I mean by that? So let's say that you have a student that you know very well and the school knows that they have had trauma in their life. They're into a difficult life circumstance. Maybe they're homeless. Maybe they've lost a parent. Maybe their family members are incarcerated and they're living with an aunt, an uncle, or a grandparent. There's any variation of situations that could happen that would be realistic. So what ends up happening, I think, oftentimes is that because teachers and administrators and everybody knows that the student is going through a challenging time, if they begin to act out even in extreme ways, or if they begin to fall behind on their homework or just have any number of troubles, I think the temptation is to, because of a good place, because of being empathetic, want to say, I'm not going to require very much of them. I'm not going to ask very much of them. If there's huge outbursts or fights or really intense behavior, the temptation with empathy is to kind of overlook it and just sort of pat the student on the head and say, hey buddy, I know you're going through a really hard time. I hope things look up. Okay, so that would be empathy without accountability. Okay, now what happens when you have high accountability but low empathy? So that can look like what has potentially happened in a lot of charter schools. They've really emphasized high accountability, like one strike and you're out, really intense suspension programs, different things like that. So they are really trying to hold the kids accountable, which is good, but maybe they're lacking in empathy, and maybe they are approaching the situation in such a way where the kids maybe feel attacked or unseen or unheard or uncared about, and then that creates kind of a structure of rebellion where it feels like, for the student sometimes, like, wow, school is just another place that is against me and not for me, and it just can end up feeling sort of like a prison system, honestly. And so I think what is needed is both of those things together, which again, it's not easy to balance. It's not easy to figure out, but I think it's really important for educators to have empathy and understanding of trauma and some of the things that the students have been through. A really helpful quote that I heard one time, essentially when thinking about our own lives or the lives of other people, essentially the quote talked about, we are often tempted to ask, what is wrong with me, or what is wrong with this person? But the quote encouraged the person to say, what has happened to make me like this? Or what has happened to that person to make them like this? That's the empathy piece. So if you are in a population of whatever race or nationality where there are really intense behaviors, where there is not a lot of interest in academics for whatever reason, where it's just really tough to teach at, I think it is good to ask, at some point, what has happened in these students' lives to cause them to not value education? What has happened in these students' lives to make them act out and behave in really difficult and challenging ways? Now, again, on the other hand, if we never hold kids accountable from a place of love and empathy, then what ends up happening is we essentially don't help them for their future. Sometimes for kids, I think school could be one of the last chances for them to get on a different path before adulthood. So if we're just like so empathetic and understanding, and we never hold kids accountable, we never teach kids appropriate ways to talk and behave, then we're essentially a part of the problem and we're setting them up for failure in life. And this is where the other two supporting beams, if you will, come in, of really having intense honesty with kids and then empowering them through education. So what do I mean by honesty? I mean that it is really important to teach children and young people and students the history of what has happened in America, both good and bad. And unfortunately, this could be a video in and of itself. Social studies and history is not something that is very focused on today for many reasons. But as a teacher, wherever you have power to add in any kind of lessons on history for Black students, I think it is so important to be honest with them. You are essentially telling them why it is important for them to value education, why it's important for them to learn how to behave, how to be respectful, how to talk to people in authority. It's really helpful for kids to understand that, unfortunately, whether you think it's a problem today or not, our country has had a history of very intense racism. So I think it's important for kids to understand that not everyone is going to be racist, but there are going to be some people that have preconceived notions about them as Black people. They're going to be people that have certain stereotypes about them as Black people. I think it's really important to be honest with students about that and help them to transcend stereotypes and not fulfill them. Not so much because they want people to think certain things about them, but at the end of the day, they want to be successful in life. So let me just give you an example of what I have told students in the past that I've worked with. And again, this is going to be controversial. Not everybody would agree with this, but I have had in the past some of the kiddos that I've taught, whenever I have to have a sub, the sub has left really awful reports. The kids really did not behave well. And I would be honest with the kids. I would say, look, this is a school, at the time that's over 90% Black. Some subs that come here are going to be expecting you to be disrespectful, loud, rowdy, naughty, not behaving. And I would tell the kids, if a sub comes in with that mentality, did you behave in such a way that confirmed that stereotype, or did you break the stereotype? Did you break any racial misperceptions by your behavior today? And that's kind of tough maybe for a fourth grader or a seventh grader to hear. But at the end of the day, I think if we are really truly trying to make kids college ready, if we're trying to get them ready to be able to succeed in whether it's corporate America or in some kind of business structure or wherever, whether we agree with it or not, whether we like it or not, in order for them to be successful, they're going to have to learn to carry themselves in a certain way and behave in a certain way. And that might mean teaching kids the difference between how they behave at home and with their friends versus how they behave in an educational context or at work. And those are difficult, uncomfortable conversations that some people find upsetting. But to me, what happens when nobody has those conversations with kids is that maybe they go through their whole life in like a trauma smart or a trauma sensitive school that is so empathetic and they are so understanding of what the kids have gone through, but then the kids are allowed to yell and talk back and throw fits and not ever do homework and not study, and the list goes on and on and on. And then maybe they get into a college, but are they going to be able to succeed in college? Maybe somebody gives them a chance at work, but if they're mouthing off to their boss and having a huge attitude, they're not going to make it very long in that job. And so that is where, to me, the accountability piece is really, really important. But again, accountability with honesty, telling them why it's important. So conversations about defiance and disrespect are not just for the sake of not annoying the teacher anymore. You're telling kids it's for the sake of your success in the future. And what I do a lot of times with students is I give them real life examples and they get a kick out of it, but I think it starts to hit home. I'll tell kids if they're like being defiant or disrespectful or mouthing off to me, I will tell them, what would happen right now? Let's do a little role playing. If I just acted the way you did toward my principal, would I have a job for very long? And a lot of times they'll say, no, you'd get fired. And I just walk them through life scenarios and I try to help them to understand how and why their behavior and the way they speak and the way they carry themselves is so important. And then that leads me into empowerment through education. Again, when it comes to teaching students, especially students of color, why reading and literacy is so important, I think it's really crucial that they know statistically through stories, through narratives of people that have become successful, why their education is so important. We're not trying to get them to do homework for the sake of our feelings. We need to convey and express to kids that we're trying to get them to do homework to help them with discipline and the skills that they need in life to be successful. We're trying to help them with deadlines, not just, for our own benefit. We're trying to help them to be successful for college and for later on in life. So again, to just kind of briefly recap, I think what's really needed to help Black students be successful: empathy, accountability, honesty about racial issues in the country, both past and present, and also empowerment through education, specifically through literacy. I think it is so important. If I had to pick anything that I would want to see improved in Black communities with Black students, it would be literacy and the importance of reading. And as a bonus thing, I would really love to see more mentorship programs developed and coming into inner city schools and Title I schools, because I do think that those relationships are so important. And so I would just invite you today to think about that in your own teaching practice. Be honest with yourself. Ask yourself, have I, from good intentions, been super empathetic with kids but didn't hold any high standards? Or do you fall more to the other side where you're laying down the law and you're telling kids what they need to be doing, but you're not feeling very bad for, any circumstances? You're just sort of annoyed by them, and anybody can fall into these situations. This is not a shame thing here. It's just some things that I think are important. And then further, have you had any conversations with your students about the history of racism in America. It's not fun. It's not something that anybody, I think, really wants to talk about. And maybe in some schools it's not allowed. But I think it's so important that students really know the history of what's happened. And you can add in positive things too. You can tell them the ways, the advancements that have happened, how things have gotten better. But I think it's really important for kids to understand that unfortunately stereotypes are real, and it's something that they have to overcome oftentimes if they want to be successful right now in America. And finally, empower kids through education, help them to see the link between education and their future, help them to understand why the things that you're asking them to do are important for them. Because as a teacher, I will totally admit it's easy to just get into a place of, you know what, you need to do it because I said so, or you need to do it because I'm the boss, or you need to do it just because. But at the end of the day, if you are working with a population of students that are suspicious toward authority and maybe haven't seen role models that have cared about them or held up to their word sometimes in really difficult situations, a lot of times the kids have no reason to trust adults and to trust teachers, and maybe they haven't had positive experiences or heard of even positive experiences with their teachers. So I don't want to make this too long. I would love to know what you guys think and what your experiences have been. And I love you guys. Thanks for watching, and I will talk with you soon.